Now that we talked about straight and curved lines, we can start to draw more complicated shapes in this video. I would like to draw these two shapes in both Photoshop and both in Illustrator, just so you see and compare the two applications, how they work. And first of all, I am going to open this Photoshop file. You can also open it from your exercise files folder. And this I just prepared for you, so it helps remember all these definitions and features that we were talking about. So you have the cursors, you have the type of anchor points, the parts of a path, and also the most important keyboard shortcuts for the pen tool here on the top. And you can always drag and drop any of these little images from the exercise files, especially if you use Bridge together with Photoshop. You can just simply select one of these images and then drag and drop it into the document. So that's exactly what I've done here. And I am going to draw over this umbrella. Because I dragged and dropped it into, it's already a smart object. And I can just reduce the opacity. It's almost like tracing the image. And then I select my pen tool and I have the same features turned on. So I'm going to start drawing with the red stroke. I zoom a little bit closer and I am going to start on the top. So this is a straight part here and it will be easier to start here. I click and then hold down shift and click, hold down still shift, click and click. Why did I hold down the shift? Because I wanted to draw vertical and horizontal line segments. Then here I'm going to click on the end and create a curve. As you can see, I just try to align it to the curve. Now I have to change direction, so my next curve will have to follow this part. For that I will need to use another keyboard shortcut. I need to alt click on this point to turn it into a corner point where I can change direction completely, and then I can add my next curve. Again, I have to change direction, so I'm going to alt click and then click and drag to create my next curve segment. Then I again have to have a corner point, so I alt click. Then this vertical straight line, I can hold down shift to draw that part. And here at the bottom, I'm going to click on the top of the curve and I hold down shift once again, like that. And then I just click and drag. I can again hold down shift if I want to make this completely vertical, the handles. Then I alt click because a straight part comes, hold down shift. Then I click here on the bottom. So again, where the curve turns, that's the best point to click. And then I click and drag up, holding down shift. Then holding down shift, I just click simply again to have the straight part. Then I click and drag, alt click to turn it corner point, again click and drag. And by the way, if I want to make these curves even better, I can always go back a couple of steps. I just used step backward. You can always choose the option from the edit menu, step backward. And you can always click on the point where the curve turns, or the middle point of the curve. So if there's a curve segment like this, you can always click on the middle point and then just drag it out and then click on the next point. You will have a nice symmetrical curve segment. So click and drag and then click. So that's another way to do it. But in this case, because these curves are very flat, I could also just simply follow them with one point. So I didn't need to click in the middle. It also depends on the size, what you need to do. So again, I alt click to turn this into a corner point because I need to change my direction completely. And I will click here on the end and I just click and drag to create the other big curve in this image. So that's one of the examples, and I'm going to use the move tool, just move these away. I go back to Bridge and I drag and drop the combined shape image. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Then I'm going to move to here on the right, reduce the opacity, something like that. And then I zoom closer, and once again I'm going to use the pen tool. Now, there's one thing you can do in Photoshop which will save you a lot of time. if you see something that can be drawn with a shape tool, and these are the shape tools: rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, line, and there are custom shape tools as well, which we are going to talk about later. So if you see anything that can be covered with one of these geometric shapes, like in this case, the big part of the speech bubble can be covered with the ellipse tool. So if you want to draw something like this, you can start by using the ellipse tool and draw a shape. Now, whenever you draw a shape, you can always hold down space to move that shape around and adjust it to where you exactly need it. And then you still hold down the mouse or the pen if you use a tablet to finish drawing, and you can align something perfectly into its place. So let me just show this again. If I, for example, click here and my ellipse is not aligned, I can hold down space while I'm still drawing, adjust one of the sides of this ellipse, and then I let go space when I'm happy with the position, and then I can just finish drawing it and let go when it's done. If you are a Creative Cloud member and you have Photoshop CS 6.1 update, you already have a feature which you would only have in Illustrator. That's also the space keyboard shortcut. Whenever you click with the pen tool and then click and drag, so you are still drawing the handles, you can hold down the space to move the anchor point around, just like with the ellipse. And then when you let go space, you can continue drawing the handles. That's a very cool thing, and I will talk about this more in Illustrator, because it's very fresh. It's only available since CS 6.1 and only for Creative Cloud members. So I just wanted to mention this, because if you have a Creative Cloud membership, you can use it if you updated Photoshop to CS 6.1. If you don't have it, then unfortunately you will only be able to use this feature in Illustrator. So we're almost there, we almost can switch to Illustrator, but let me just finish drawing this shape here. So how would I combine an ellipse with another path? That's what I would like to show you now. So I can switch between options here on the top when I have the pen tool and I have a shape layer selected. So that's my shape layer with the red ellipse. I can select Combine Shapes option. If I have Combine Shapes option selected, I can draw by next path by click and drag and creating a new path here. Then I just alt click here, and then I click and drag to create another curve segment. And as you can see, these two paths are already merged or added together into one shape. So if I deselect, I select another layer, you can see they look like one path together, but actually they are two separate paths, just simply joined together in one shape layer. The advantage of doing this is that it was much easier to draw it this way, using an ellipse and then adding this little part with a manual path. But also an advantage is using the path selection tool, I can always move these separately. So I can put this little part anywhere, the little tail of the speech bubble, anywhere where I want it. I can even select it and use the free transform path, which is Command T or Control T on PC, and rotate it around or make it bigger. And I can do whatever I want with this while still maintaining the two paths joined together. Even if I move it away and move it back, it still will be one shape. I will talk more about combining paths together in another tutorial, but first, before we go to the next video, I would like to show exactly the same things in Illustrator. So if I go to Bridge and I drag and drop the umbrella into Illustrator, I will be able to do exactly the same thing. Here, all I need to do is double click on the layer where the umbrella is, and I can choose Template, then click on OK, and that turned it into a tracing paper. Now all I need is a separate layer, so I clicked on New Layer option, and I can start drawing. I'm going to set my fill color to none, and I set my stroke color to red, just to have a very similar way of working to Photoshop. And I am going to select the pen tool. By the way, here in Illustrator, if you look for something similar to the freeform pen tool, that's here the pencil tool. With the pencil tool, you can draw anchor points much faster, but it won't be as accurate as drawing with the pen tool. So the pencil tool will automatically create anchor points, while with the pen tool, you do them manually. So let me just select the pen tool. I zoom a little bit closer here, and I click, and drag. You can see it works almost exactly the same way. I'm going to increase the point size a bit here in the appearance panel. I can do that. I will use 5 points. And then once again, here in Illustrator, there's a difference. If I click on a point, an anchor point, which has a smooth point, I can just simply turn it into a corner point by clicking on it. Here you don't have to hold down Alt. The same thing applies. Shift is going to create horizontal and vertical lines. Then I click and drag, and then remember here I just need to click to turn a smooth point to a corner point, or vice versa. Again, just click and drag, click, shift click, click and drag with shift held down, click and drag, shift held down, click, shift click, click and drag with shift, click and drag, like that, shift click, click and drag, click, and then click and drag. So very fast way to do exactly the same thing. And remember, here in Illustrator, if you want to use that keyboard shortcut, the space, here it works. So for example, if I click here and drag, and I can see, oh, it's not in place, I can hold down space and move it into place, and then when I let go space, I can finish drawing that point, or aligning the handle points. So let me just go back a couple of steps. For example, again here, if I want to add this line, if I click and hold down space, I can move it into position and then continue. Again, if I click in a wrong position, just hold down space, move it into place, and then let go. So that's the umbrella. And now let me do the speech bubble. I am going to create, or just drag and drop that again from Bridge. Drag and drop. The way I switch between applications like Bridge and Photoshop or Illustrator is pressing Command Tab and holding down Command, and then just pressing Tab a couple of times until I reach the application I need. Or you can also use your cursor. So Command Tab on Mac and Alt Tab on PC, and then choose the application you want to switch to. So I want to stay here in Illustrator, and I would like to just draw over this shape once again. So I'm going to put it in another layer, which I again turn into a template by double clicking on the layer. I create another layer, and I am going to draw here. So I just zoom closer, use the pen tool. I am going to do the same thing. I draw the little tail separately, just like I did it in Photoshop. Draw it separately, and then use the ellipse tool. We have the shape tools here, almost exactly the same as Photoshop. And then again, I can use the space to position the shape itself. And I put them together like this. And then if I want to have them as one path, I can select them, the two together. And there is a very cool feature called Shape Builder, with which we can just click and drag over these parts. And now it's turned into one shape. You will see that using Illustrator is much easier for illustrations, but it's important to learn to use the pen tool in both of these applications. So now that we learned to create more complicated shapes, we can talk about drawing symmetrical shapes in the next video.